Sister Catherine walked through the quiet hallways of St. Anne's Convent every morning at 6. Her routine hadn't changed much in 47 years. Wake up, morning prayers, breakfast in silence, then work in the garden or help with the chapel preparations. She was 73 now, and her knees weren't what they used to be. But she never complained. That wasn't her way. The other sisters knew her as someone peaceful and kind. She had gentle eyes that crinkled when she smiled, and she always had time to listen when someone needed to talk. The younger nuns often came to her for advice about their struggles with faith or homesickness. She understood loneliness better than most, but there was something about Sister Catherine that very few people knew. Something she had buried so deep inside herself that sometimes even she forgot it was there, until she walked past that piano. Every single day she had to pass through the community hall to get to the chapel, and every single day there it sat, a beautiful grand piano, its black surface polished to perfection, reflecting the light from the tall windows. It was the kind of piano that belonged in a concert hall, not a small convent in the countryside. Someone had donated it years ago, hoping it would bring joy to the sisters. Instead, it mostly collected dust. Mother Superior had made the rules very clear from the beginning. The piano was not a toy. It was not for casual use. It was reserved for special occasions only, when they had important visitors or formal ceremonies. And even then, only the properly trained musicians were allowed to touch it. There was a young woman from town who came twice a year to play during their Christmas service and Easter celebration. That was it. Sister Catherine would slow her steps whenever she passed by it. She couldn't help herself. Her fingers would twitch slightly at her sides, muscle memory pulling at her hands even after all these years. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she would reach out and barely touch the edge of the keys. Just one key, never pressing it down, never making a sound. Just feeling the smooth ivory beneath her fingertip, because once upon a time, in what felt like another lifetime, those hands had made magic. Before she became Sister Catherine, she was just Catherine O'Brien, a little girl from Dublin with wild red hair and scraped knees who couldn't sit still. Her parents didn't have much money, but her mother cleaned houses for wealthy families in the city. One of those families had a piano, and one day when Catherine was 5 years old, she touched the keys while her mother was working upstairs. She still remembered that moment. The sound that came out wasn't just noise. It was something alive, something that spoke to a part of her she didn't know existed. She pressed another key, then another. Before long, she was picking out a simple melody she'd heard on the radio. The lady of the house came running down the stairs, probably ready to scold the cleaning woman's child for touching her expensive piano, but she stopped in the doorway and just listened. When Catherine finished, the woman asked her if anyone had taught her that. Catherine shook her head no. She just heard it and played it back. That's how it started. The woman convinced Catherine's parents to let her pay for lessons. She said it would be a crime to let a gift like that go to waste, and what a gift it was. Catherine learned faster than any student her teacher had ever seen. She didn't just play the notes on the page. She understood them, felt them, made them speak. By the time she was 15, she was winning competitions across Ireland. By 18, she'd played in London, Paris, and Vienna. The newspapers called her a prodigy. They said she was destined for greatness. Carnegie Hall, recording contracts, a life of fame and music and everything a young musician could dream of. She remembered those years like scenes from a movie about someone else's life. The applause, the flowers thrown onto the stage, the way the audience would go completely silent when she played, holding their breath, the adrenaline that rushed through her veins every time she walked onto a stage, the joy of getting lost in the music, of becoming one with the piano until she forgot where she ended and the notes began. But she also remembered the pressure, the constant traveling, the competition with other musicians, the way people started treating her like a product instead of a person, the loneliness of hotel rooms in foreign cities, the expectation to always be perfect, always be brilliant, always be on. And then there was Thomas. She was 23 when she met him. He was a violinist, talented and handsome, with a smile that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. They fell in love quickly the way young people do. Made plans for their future. Talked about traveling together, performing together, building a life filled with music. But Thomas died in a car accident 6 months before their wedding. The grief nearly destroyed her. She couldn't play for months. When she finally tried to return to performing, something had changed. The music didn't bring joy anymore. It brought pain. Every note reminded her of what she'd lost. Every concert felt empty without him in the audience. That's when she found herself in a small church one rainy afternoon, not even sure why she'd walked in. She sat in the back pew and cried, and somehow in that silence she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Peace. A sense that maybe there was more to life than performance and applause. Maybe there was a different kind of purpose waiting for her. A year later, she entered the convent. Her family thought she was running away. Maybe they were right, but she also felt called to something bigger than herself. She wanted to serve, to find meaning in simplicity, to let go of the ego and the fame and just be. Part of taking her vows meant leaving her old life behind, including the piano. Mother Superior had been kind but firm. This was a place of humility and service, not performance and pride. If Catherine wanted to truly commit to this life, she needed to let go of the things that tied her to her past, so she did. Or at least she tried. 47 years later, she still walked past that piano every day. And every day, a small part of her heart broke just a little bit more. Her fingers still remembered Chopin, still knew Rachmaninoff by heart, still ached to feel the keys beneath them to bring those beautiful sounds to life one more time. But she kept walking, head down, hands clasped, silent. Because that's what good nuns did. They sacrificed. They obeyed. They let go of worldly desires, even when those desires felt less like vanity and more like breathing. Sister Catherine reached the chapel door and pushed it open. Time for morning prayers. Time to push those thoughts away again. Time to remember that she'd made her choice all those years ago, and there was no going back now. The piano would stay silent, and so would she. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when everything changed. Sister Catherine was in the garden pulling weeds from around the rose bushes, when Sister Anne came hurrying down the path, slightly out of breath. "Catherine, Mother Superior wants to see you in her office right away." Sister Catherine's heart skipped a beat. In 47 years, being summoned to Mother Superior's office was never good news. Had she done something wrong? Forgotten some duty? She wiped the dirt from her hands and followed Sister Anne back inside, her mind racing through possibilities. Mother Superior's office was on the second floor, a small room with a wooden desk and a window that overlooked the garden. When Sister Catherine knocked and entered, she found Mother Superior sitting with her hands folded, looking unusually serious. But there was someone else in the room too, a young woman maybe 30 years old, with a camera bag slung over her shoulder and a friendly smile. "Sister Catherine, this is Miss Bridget Murphy. She's a documentary filmmaker from the city," Mother Superior explained. "She's here to make a film about our life here at the convent, about our daily routines, our faith, our community." Bridget stood up and shook Sister Catherine's hand warmly. "It's so nice to meet you. I've been fascinated by monastic life for years. Most people have no idea what it's really like, you know? They think it's all just praying in silence, but I want to show the real human side of it." Sister Catherine nodded politely, still confused about why she'd been called. Usually Mother Superior handled all matters with visitors. "Bridget will be here for the next 2 weeks filming various aspects of our daily life," Mother Superior continued. "She'd like to interview several of the sisters, yourself included. I thought you might be willing to share your story about coming to the convent later in life." Relief washed over Sister Catherine. "That was all. Just an interview." "Of course, Mother Superior. I'd be happy to help." Over the next few days, Bridget became a familiar presence around the convent. She was quiet and respectful, never pushing her camera where it wasn't welcome. She filmed the sisters working in the garden, preparing meals together, singing hymns in the chapel. The other nuns gradually grew comfortable with her presence. Sister Catherine found herself liking the young filmmaker. Bridget had a gentle way about her, asking questions that showed she genuinely cared about understanding their lives. During their interview, Sister Catherine talked about finding peace in service, about the beauty of living simply, about the community of women who had become her family. But she didn't mention the piano. That part of her life felt too personal, too painful to share with a stranger and a camera. It was on the 8th day of filming when it happened. Bridget was setting up her equipment in the community hall, planning to film the sisters having their weekly social time together. That's when she noticed the grand piano in the corner, partially covered by a white cloth. "Oh wow, what a beautiful piano," she exclaimed. "Does anyone here play?" The room went quiet. Several of the younger sisters glanced at Sister Catherine, who was sitting by the window mending a torn pillowcase. Sister Mary, who had been at the convent for 30 years and knew Catherine's story, spoke up softly. "Sister Catherine used to play, long ago." Bridget's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? Would you be willing to play something for the film? It would be wonderful to capture that. Music is such a big part of spiritual life." Before Sister Catherine could even respond, Mother Superior entered the room. She must have overheard the conversation because her face was already set in that expression Catherine knew well, the one that meant the discussion was over before it began. "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Mother Superior said firmly. "Sister Catherine hasn't played in decades. She's far too out of practice, and it wouldn't be appropriate to showcase something that's no longer part of our daily life here. The piano is reserved for special occasions only, when we have a trained musician come from town. But Mother Superior, if Sister Catherine used to play—" Bridget started. "That was a very long time ago," Mother Superior interrupted, her voice kind but absolute. "Sister Catherine is 73 years old. Her playing days are behind her. I'm sure you understand." Sister Catherine felt something crack inside her chest. Too old, out of practice. That's what she was now. Not a musician. Just an elderly nun who used to be someone else. She kept her eyes down, focusing intently on the pillowcase in her hands, her vision blurring slightly. Bridget looked between Mother Superior and Sister Catherine, sensing the tension in the room. "Of course I understand. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The subject was dropped and filming continued as if nothing had happened. But Sister Catherine could barely focus on her mending. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she had to set the pillowcase aside. She excused herself quietly and walked to the chapel, needing a moment alone. That night, Bridget couldn't sleep. Something about the whole interaction bothered her deeply. The way Sister Catherine's face had fallen, the way the other sisters had looked at each other with knowing sadness, and especially that phrase on "too old." She'd seen something in Sister Catherine's eyes during their interview. A depth, a passion, a whole lifetime of experiences. This wasn't just some nun who used to tinker around on piano keys. There was a real story there. She could feel it. The next morning, Bridget did something she probably shouldn't have. She went to the local library and started searching through old newspaper archives. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for, just following an instinct. And that's when she found them. Newspaper, clippings from the 1960s and 70s. "Irish Prodigy Takes Vienna" by storm. Young Catherine O'Brien stuns audience with Chopin performance. Rising, star set for American tour. There were photographs, too. A young woman with flowing red hair, sitting at a grand piano, her fingers dancing across the keys. The same gentle eyes, the same delicate features. Definitely her. Bridget's heart was racing as she read article after article. This wasn't just someone who used to play piano. This was someone who had been compared to the greatest pianists of her generation. Someone who had performed in the most prestigious concert halls in Europe. Someone who had been destined for Carnegie Hall. And then suddenly the article stopped. 1973, after that nothing. Catherine O'Brien had simply vanished from the music world. Bridget sat back in her chair, stunned. How did someone with that much talent just disappear? What had happened to make her give it all up? And more importantly, how could someone let a gift like that stay buried for over 50 years? She gathered copies of the articles and drove back to the convent, her mind spinning with possibilities. This wasn't just about adding a nice musical moment to her documentary anymore. This was a real story, a human story about sacrifice, about choosing between two different kinds of calling, about what we give up and what we hold on to. When she arrived, she asked to speak with Mother Superior privately. She spread the newspaper clippings across the desk, watching the older woman's face carefully. "Mother Superior, I found these at the library this morning. Did you know about Sister Catherine's past?" Mother Superior looked at the clippings for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she sighed. "Yes, I knew. Catherine told me everything when she first came to us. She wanted to leave that life behind. Start fresh. Focus on serving God rather than serving her own ambitions." "With all due respect," Bridget said carefully, what if playing wasn't about ambition? What if it was part of who she is, part of how she experiences the world? Mother Superior was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. What exactly are you proposing? Let her play just once. For the camera. Let her share that gift with the world again. You talk about living humbly, about service. Well, maybe hiding a gift like that isn't humble. Maybe it's wasteful. The words hung in the air between them. Bridget held her breath, wondering if she'd gone too far. But Mother Superior was looking out the window at the garden, where Sister Catherine was kneeling among the flowers, her gray hair covered by her veil, her hands deep in the earth. I'll need to pray on this, Mother Superior finally said. And I'll need to speak with Sister Catherine. This has to be her choice, not mine or yours. Bridget nodded, trying to contain her hope. Thank you. That's all I'm asking. That evening, Mother Superior called Sister Catherine to her office again. This time, when Catherine entered, she found the newspaper clippings spread across the desk. Her past, laid out in black and white, she stood frozen in the doorway, her face going pale. I think, Mother Superior said gently, that it's time we had a real conversation about that piano. Sister Catherine stood in the doorway of Mother Superior's office, staring at the newspaper clippings spread across the desk. Her breath caught in her throat. There she was, young and full of life, her fingers frozen mid-performance in grainy black and white photographs, headlines she hadn't seen in 50 years. Please sit down, Mother Superior said softly. Catherine's legs felt weak as she moved to the chair. She couldn't take her eyes off those images. That girl in the photographs felt like a stranger now, someone she used to know a lifetime ago. The filmmaker found these at the library, Mother Superior explained. I have to admit, Catherine, I knew you had musical training when you came to us, but I never realized the extent of it. You were quite famous, weren't you? Catherine nodded slowly, her voice barely a whisper. For a little while, yes. Why didn't you ever tell us, tell me? We've known each other for nearly 50 years. Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. Because I didn't want to be that person anymore. I wanted to be someone new, someone better, someone who served God instead of serving her own pride. Mother Superior leaned back in her chair, studying Catherine's face. Is that truly why you stopped playing? Because of pride? The question hung in the air. Catherine felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. How could she explain it? How could she make anyone understand? I stopped because it hurt too much, Catherine finally admitted. After Thomas died, every note reminded me of him, of what we'd lost, of the life we were supposed to have together. And then I came here and I thought if I could just leave it all behind, the pain would go away too. And did it? Catherine looked up, meeting Mother Superior's eyes. No, it never did. I just learned to live with it. Mother Superior was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. You know, Catherine, I've been thinking a lot about what that young filmmaker said to me. About gifts being wasted. About how hiding something God gave you might not be humility at all. Mother Superior, I took vows. Yes, you did. Vows to serve God in this community. But tell me honestly, have you been serving God by walking past that piano every day with your heart breaking? Or have you just been punishing yourself? The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. She opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Because deep down, she knew there was truth in what Mother Superior was saying. How many times had she told herself she was being humble, when really she was just hiding? How many times had she convinced herself that sacrifice meant suffering, when maybe it was supposed to mean something else entirely? I'm old now, Catherine said weakly. My fingers aren't what they used to be. I haven't practiced in decades. I wouldn't even know if I could still play. There's only one way to find out, Mother Superior replied. Bridget wants to film you playing, just once. You don't have to decide right now. Sleep on it, pray on it. But Catherine, I want you to really think about this. Not about what you think you should do, but about what your heart is telling you. That night, Sister Catherine lay in her small bed, unable to sleep. Moonlight streamed through her window, casting shadows on the plain white walls. She could hear Sister Anne snoring softly in the next room. Everything was exactly as it always was, peaceful, quiet, safe. But inside her chest, something was stirring. Something that had been asleep for so long she'd almost forgotten it was there. She thought about Thomas, about how he used to say that her music was a gift not just for her, but for everyone who heard it. You make people feel things they didn't know they could feel, he'd told her once after a performance. That's not pride, Catherine. That's purpose. She thought about all those years she'd spent walking past that piano, telling herself she was being strong, being disciplined, following her vows. But what if she'd just been afraid? Afraid that if she touched those keys again, all the pain would come flooding back. Afraid that she wouldn't be good enough anymore. Afraid that the music had left her completely. What if Mother Superior was right? What if she'd been punishing herself all this time? The next morning at breakfast, Catherine could barely eat. The other sisters chatted quietly around her, but their voices seemed far away. She kept thinking about the piano, about whether her fingers would even remember what to do, about whether she had the courage to try. After breakfast, she found Bridget in the community hall packing up some equipment. The young filmmaker looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Sister Catherine." "Good morning." Catherine hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Mother Superior told me about what you found, about the newspapers." "I hope I didn't overstep," Bridget said quickly. "I was just curious, and then when I found all those articles, I couldn't believe it." "You were incredible." "I was young," Catherine said softly. "Talent doesn't disappear just because time passes," Bridget replied. "Look, I know this is probably scary. I know Mother Superior said you were too old and out of practice. But I've been filming documentaries for 10 years and I've learned something important. The most powerful stories are the ones about people finding their way back to who they really are." Catherine felt something shift inside her. "You really think I could still do it?" "I think you won't know unless you try. And honestly, even if it's not perfect, even if you're rusty, I think there's something beautiful about watching someone reconnect with a part of themselves they thought was lost forever." Catherine looked across the hall at the grand piano. The white cloth had been removed and morning sunlight was streaming across its polished surface. It looked almost like it was waiting for her. "When would you want to film?" Catherine asked quietly. Bridget's face lit up. "Whenever you're ready." "Tomorrow? Next week?" "You tell me." "Tomorrow," Catherine heard herself say. "If I don't do it tomorrow, I might lose my courage." That evening, Mother Superior made an announcement at dinner. Tomorrow afternoon, Sister Catherine would be playing the piano for Bridget's documentary. Any sisters who wished to attend were welcome. The news rippled through the dining hall. Some of the younger nuns had no idea Catherine even knew how to play. The older ones, like Sister Mary, looked at her with tears in their eyes. After dinner, Catherine went to the chapel alone. She knelt in the front pew and prayed, not for the strength to play well, not for her fingers to remember, but for the courage to be honest, to stop hiding, to let herself feel everything she'd been pushing down for 50 years. When she finally left the chapel, she didn't go straight to her room. Instead, she found herself walking to the community hall. The building was dark and empty. She stood in front of the piano for a long time, just looking at it. Then slowly she reached out and lifted the cover off the keys. They gleamed in the moonlight coming through the windows. 88 keys. She knew every single one, had memorized them as a child, had made them sing in concert halls across Europe. She sat down on the bench. Her hands were shaking as she held them over the keys. She didn't press down, not yet. She just let them hover there, remembering the weight of them, the feel of ivory and ebony, the way each key had its own personality, its own voice. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "I'm sorry I left you," she whispered to the piano. "I'm sorry I stayed away so long." Then she stood up and walked back to her room. Tomorrow would be soon enough. Tomorrow she would find out if the music was still there. Tomorrow she would find out if she was brave enough to let it back in. That night, for the first time in 47 years, Sister Catherine dreamed about playing. Not the nightmares she used to have, full of loss and grief, but something different, something that felt almost like joy. When she woke up the next morning, her fingers were moving in her sleep, playing songs only she could hear. The sun was rising over the garden, painting everything gold and pink. It was going to be a beautiful day, and somewhere deep inside her, something that had been silent for half a century was beginning to wake up. She could feel it humming in her bones. The music. It had never really left her at all. It had just been waiting. Waiting for her to be ready. Waiting for her to come home. Today was the day. Ready or not, Sister Catherine was going to play again. The morning passed in a blur. Sister Catherine went through her usual routines, praying, working in the garden, helping prepare lunch. But her mind was somewhere else entirely. Her hands kept trembling slightly, and twice she dropped things she was carrying. Sister Mary squeezed her shoulder at one point and whispered, You're going to be wonderful. Catherine wasn't so sure. By 2 o'clock, the community hall had filled with people. All the sisters from the convent were there, sitting on folding chairs that had been set up in rows. Bridget had brought her full camera crew, 3 people total, and they were setting up lights and microphones. The piano had been moved to the center of the room, positioned so the afternoon light fell across it perfectly. Sister Catherine stood in the doorway, frozen. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. 73 years old, and she felt like that 5-year-old girl again, touching piano keys for the first time, terrified and thrilled all at once. Mother Superior appeared beside her. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready." "I'll never be ready," Catherine whispered. "But I need to do it anyway." She walked into the room on legs that didn't quite feel like her own. The other sisters smiled at her encouragingly. Some of them had tears in their eyes already, and she hadn't even played a note yet. Bridget gave her a thumbs up from behind the camera. Catherine sat down on the piano bench. It creaked slightly under her weight. She adjusted her position, something she'd done 10,000 times before but felt strange now. Foreign, like she was trying to remember how to do something her body used to know automatically. The keys stretched out before her. 88 possibilities. She placed her hands in position, the way she'd been taught as a child. Proper form. Curved fingers. Relaxed wrists. Muscle memory clicking into place after 50 years of silence. Then she stopped. Her hands hovered over the keys, shaking. She couldn't do this. What had she been thinking? She was an old woman who hadn't practiced in half a century. She was going to embarrass herself. Embarrass everyone. Make a fool of herself on camera for the whole world to see. She started to stand up. "Wait," Bridget said softly. "Before you play, can I ask you something?" "For the camera?" Catherine nodded, grateful for the delay. "Why did you stop playing all those years ago?" The question cut right to the heart of everything. Catherine looked down at her hands, at the age spots and wrinkles, at the calluses from garden work instead of piano strings. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. "I stopped because I was in pain. My fiancé died and the music reminded me of everything I'd lost, so I ran away from it. I thought if I gave it up, the hurt would stop. But you know what I learned? Pain doesn't work that way. You can't run from it. You can only decide whether you're going to let it destroy you or transform you. And which did you choose?" Catherine smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I'm still deciding." Then she turned back to the piano. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room, and everything else disappeared. Her fingers stumbled at first. She hit a wrong note, then another. Her timing was off. Her hands felt stiff and uncertain. This wasn't the performance of a concert pianist. This was the fumbling attempt of someone trying to remember a language she used to speak fluently. But then something shifted. Her fingers found their rhythm. The muscle memory buried deep in her bones began to wake up, like a flower opening to sunlight after a long winter. The notes started flowing instead of stuttering. She stopped thinking about her hands and just felt the music, and oh, the music. It poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Every year of silence. Every moment of longing. Every prayer she'd whispered in the chapel. Every time she'd walked past this piano with her heart breaking. It was all there in the notes, transformed into something beautiful and terrible and true. Tears streamed down her face as she played, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. This was more than performance. This was confession. This was grief and joy and everything in between, all woven together into something that couldn't be expressed in words. In the audience, the sisters were crying too. Even Mother Superior had tears running down her cheeks. Bridget's camera operators had forgotten to adjust their equipment, too caught up in what they were witnessing to remember their jobs. They'd been filming documentaries for years, but they'd never seen anything like this. This wasn't just music. This was a human soul laying itself bare. Catherine finished the nocturne, the final notes hanging in the air like a question waiting to be answered. The room was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one breathed. They were all afraid that if they made a sound, the spell would break, but Catherine wasn't done. Without pausing, without thinking, her hands moved into the opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The music changed from gentle and melancholic to powerful and intense. Her fingers flew across the keys with a speed that seemed impossible for a woman her age. This wasn't the playing of someone rusty and out of practice. This was someone who had been born to make this sound. Someone who understood music in her bones, in her blood, in every cell of her being. The years of silence hadn't destroyed her gift. They'd aged it like wine, deepened it, made it richer and more complex than it had ever been when she was young. She attacked the keys during the dramatic sections, her whole body swaying with the intensity of the music. Then she'd gentle into the softer passages, her touch so delicate it was like she was afraid of breaking something precious. She played with the wisdom of someone who had lived through real loss, real pain, real transformation. The young Catherine O'Brien had been technically brilliant. But Sister Catherine was something more. She was an artist who had learned that music wasn't about perfection, it was about truth. When she played the final crashing chords of the prelude, the sound seemed to shake the very walls of the room. Then silence. Complete and total silence. Catherine sat at the piano, her hands still on the keys, her chest heaving. She was exhausted, exhilarated, more alive than she'd felt in 50 years. Then the applause started. It began with Sister Mary, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Then the others joined in, all of them on their feet, tears streaming down their faces. The sound filled the room, bouncing off the walls, drowning out everything else. Catherine stood up from the piano bench, slightly dizzy. She looked around at all these women who had become her family, who were celebrating with her, crying with her. Bridget was openly sobbing behind her camera, not even pretending to be professional anymore. Mother Superior walked up to the piano and took both of Catherine's hands in her own. "Forgive me," she said quietly, "for ever telling you that you were too old. For ever making you think that gift should stay hidden." "There's nothing to forgive," Catherine replied. "I'm the one who hid. You just gave me permission." The sisters crowded around, hugging her, telling her how beautiful it was, how they'd never heard anything like it. Catherine accepted their love and praise with grace, but inside she felt something different. Something quiet and certain. She had played again. After 50 years of silence, she had touched those keys and brought them to life. And the world hadn't ended. The grief hadn't destroyed her. Instead, the music had done what it always did. It had transformed pain into beauty, had taken all her broken pieces and made them into something whole. That evening, after everyone had left and the hall was empty again, Catherine returned to the piano. She sat down and played for hours. No cameras, no audience. Just her and the music she'd lost and found again. She played all the pieces she used to perform. She played the songs Thomas had loved. She played the lullabies her mother used to sing. She played until her fingers ached and the sky outside had gone from orange to purple to black. And for the first time in 50 years, Sister Catherine felt completely at peace. Not because the pain was gone, but because she'd finally stopped running from it. She understood now what Thomas had tried to tell her all those years ago. Music wasn't about pride or performance or proving anything to anyone. It was about taking everything you felt, everything you'd lived through, and transforming it into something that could touch other people's hearts. It was about being fully human, fully alive, fully yourself. Catherine closed the piano lid gently and walked back to her room. Tomorrow she'd return to her regular routines, prayers and garden work and all the simple tasks that made up her days. But something fundamental had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't punishing herself. She was just Catherine. The girl who fell in love with piano keys at 5 years old. The woman who had suffered and survived and found her way back home, and the music, which had been sleeping inside her all this time, was finally awake again. Bridget left the convent 3 days later with hours of footage. But she knew exactly which 7 minutes would change everything. She'd filmed dozens of documentaries, interviewed hundreds of people, but she'd never captured anything like Sister Catherine's performance. She could still hear those notes in her sleep. Back in her small editing studio in the city, she worked 12-hour days putting the documentary together. But it was that piano sequence that kept drawing her back. The way Catherine's face transformed when she started playing. The tears streaming down her cheeks. The raw emotion in every note. The stunned silence of the audience followed by that thunderous applause. She created a separate clip, just the performance with a simple introduction explaining who Sister Catherine was. Former concert pianist, 50 years of silence, playing again at 73. She posted it on her social media accounts on a Thursday evening, hoping maybe a few thousand people might watch it. Then she went to bed. When she woke up Friday morning, her phone was exploding with notifications. The video had been viewed 2 million times overnight. And the numbers were climbing faster than she could refresh the page. Comments were pouring in from all over the world. People were crying, sharing their own stories about giving up dreams and finding them again, talking about hidden talents and second chances and the power of music to heal. By Friday afternoon, major news outlets were calling. Could they use the footage? Could they interview Sister Catherine? By Saturday, the video had hit 20 million views. By Sunday, 50 million. Sister Catherine knew nothing about any of this. The convent didn't have internet access, and none of the sisters spent time on social media. She was back to her regular routine, though now she spent an hour each evening playing piano. Mother Superior had given her permission, saying the music brought joy to the whole community. It was Monday morning when Bridget showed up at the convent again, this time with a laptop and a nervous energy that made Sister Mary immediately go find Catherine in the garden. "You need to see this," Bridget said, setting up the laptop on the kitchen table. Mother Superior stood behind them, curious about what could bring the young filmmaker back so soon. Bridget pulled up the video. The view counter read 72 million and climbing. Sister Catherine stared at the screen, not understanding. "What does that number mean?" "It means 72 million people have watched you play," Bridget explained. "Your video has gone viral. People all over the world have seen it. And Catherine, they're not just watching, they're responding." She scrolled through the comments, translating some that were in other languages. Messages from Japan, Brazil, Germany, Australia. A woman in her 60s saying she'd given up painting after her husband died, but watching Catherine inspired her to pick up a brush again. A man who hadn't touched his guitar in 20 years after his band broke up. A teenager who thought she was too old at 17 to learn piano, realizing age was just a number. "They're calling you the piano nun," Bridget continued. "There are news articles about you in every major publication. And Catherine, that's not all." She pulled up emails from concert halls. The Royal Albert Hall in London, the Sydney Opera House, Carnegie Hall in New York, all of them extending invitations, asking if Sister Catherine would consider performing. Record labels were interested. Television shows wanted interviews. Catherine felt dizzy. She gripped the edge of the table. "I don't understand." "I'm just an old woman who played a piano. I'm not famous anymore. That was half a century ago." Mother Superior spoke up, her voice gentle. "Catherine, I think you're famous again. Or perhaps famous in a different way than before." Over the next few days, the phone at the convent rang constantly. The sisters had to take turns answering it because there were too many calls. Reporters standing outside the gate. Letters arriving by the hundreds from people around the world sharing their stories. Sister Catherine didn't know what to do with any of it. She'd spent 50 years trying to live a quiet, humble life, and now the entire world seemed to be watching her. It was overwhelming, frightening. She went to the chapel and prayed for guidance. That evening, Mother Superior called a meeting with Catherine and the other senior sisters. They sat around the old wooden table in the dining hall, trying to figure out what to do. "The question is simple," Mother Superior said. "Do you want to perform again? Really perform, I mean. Not just for us, but for the world?" Catherine was quiet for a long time. "I don't know if I can. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the young woman who performed in Vienna and Paris. I'm a nun. This is my home. This is my life." "It doesn't have to be one or the other," Sister Mary suggested. "You can be both. A nun and a pianist. Why should you have to choose?" "Because I already chose," Catherine said. 50 years ago I chose this life." "And you can still choose this life," Mother Superior replied. "But maybe this life has room for more than we thought. Maybe God gave you that gift for a reason. Not just for you, but for others. Look at what your playing has done. Look at how many people it's touched. Is that not a form of service?" The words hit Catherine like a revelation. Service. That's what she'd dedicated her life to. Serving God and serving others. She'd always thought that meant giving things up, making sacrifices, living small. But what if service could also mean sharing your gifts, using your talents to bring joy and hope to people who needed it? She thought about all those comments Bridget had shown her. People saying her music had inspired them to try again, to pick up old dreams they'd abandoned, to believe that it was never too late to become who they were meant to be. If that wasn't service, what was? One concert, Catherine finally said. I'll do one concert, but I want it to be special. I want the money to go somewhere that matters. Bridget helped arrange everything. They chose a beautiful cathedral in Dublin, the city where Catherine had grown up. All the proceeds would go to music programs for underprivileged children, helping kids who loved music but whose families couldn't afford lessons. Just like Catherine had been helped all those years ago, the concert was scheduled for 6 weeks away. Catherine practiced every day, her fingers remembering more and more. The stiffness gradually faded. The confidence slowly returned. But this time was different from when she was young. She wasn't performing to prove anything or to chase fame. She was playing to give something back. The night of the concert arrived. The cathedral was packed with 2,000 people. Some had paid hundreds for tickets, all that money going to help children learn music. Catherine stood backstage in her simple nun's habit, looking at her reflection in a mirror. 73 years old, gray hair tucked under her veil, wrinkled hands that had dug in gardens and scrubbed floors and folded in prayer for 50 years. "You ready?" Bridget asked, appearing beside her. "I'm terrified," Catherine admitted. "Good, that means it matters." Catherine walked out onto the stage. The applause was deafening. People were on their feet before she'd even sat down. She saw reporters with cameras. She saw young children in the front row with their parents. She saw nuns from her convent, Mother Superior, beaming with pride, and in her mind, just for a moment, she saw Thomas, smiling at her the way he used to before her performances, believing in her, loving her, reminding her that this was what she was born to do. She sat at the piano and began to play. This time there was no hesitation, no fear, just music pouring out of her like prayer, like confession, like the most honest thing she'd ever said without words. She played Chopin and Rachmaninoff and Beethoven. She played pieces she'd performed 50 years ago, and pieces she'd only recently remembered. She played for 90 minutes straight, and the audience sat in absolute silence, holding their breath, afraid to break the spell. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. People were crying openly. Catherine stood and bowed, overwhelmed by the love in that room. This was what she'd been afraid of all those years. Not the performance itself, but the feeling, the connection, the vulnerability of letting people see inside your soul through music. But she wasn't afraid anymore. After the concert, Catherine returned to the convent. She declined the other offers, the tours, the recording contracts. She'd said what she needed to say, done what she needed to do. The video of that cathedral performance would end up being viewed by over 200 million people worldwide, but Catherine never watched it. She went back to her regular life. Prayers and garden work and community. But now every evening she played piano for her sisters. And once a month, children from the music program she'd funded would come to visit, and she'd teach them, passing on everything she knew to the next generation. Sister Catherine had learned something important. You don't have to choose between who you were and who you've become. Sometimes the greatest service is simply being fully yourself, using all your gifts, holding nothing back. She was 73 years old. She was a nun. She was a pianist. She was all of it at once, and for the first time in 50 years, she was completely, beautifully free.